Today we're going to be reviewing the defense's closing statements, 2.5 days worth, okay, in the Mushroom Luncheon Massacre. So buckle up because we're almost done with this crazy ride.
Hey, 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 welcome to the Sofa Squad, sipping from the cup at hey, hey.
Now hold on everybody, let's do a quick sofa sidebar now. Keep in mind, ain't no cop, ain't no doctor, ain't no lawyer, ain't no therapist, ain't none of that fancy credentialed stuff, okay? Only credentials we got up in here is my sass, and this sofa. Now keep in mind also, I'm just giving my opinions on very public information, so do your own research, come to your own opinions, and drop them off in the comment section. And while you're down there, if you do like what you see here at the Sofa Squad, drop a little like, drop a little comment, drop a little share. It helps the channel out immensely. Now let's get edition. Hello Sofa Squad and welcome back to the sofa. That's a sofa, and this is a Paul, and this is a little round pillow. I hope y'all are doing well. My name's Paul if you're new to the channel. If you're not new to the channel, well guess what? My name's still Paul. Okay. So y'all, we're finishing up here. Now by the time you're seeing this, like the defense is closing. It's been happened, right? But I'm just trying to catch up with everything and whatnot. Now also be sure and listen to like the Mushroom Daily, ABC, all these resources right here for people who are actually in the courtroom. They're listening to them. They give like one-on-one account or whatever. So be sure to check them out. All that's going to be up on the screen here for you to explore for your interest in shrooms at your own leisure. So we're going to be reviewing the defense's closing statements. This was in the Mushroom Massacre Luncheon trial. Erin Patterson, Australia. It's wrapping up. We'll probably have a verdict, I don't know how long, maybe next week or something, depending on when you're seeing this. So we shall see. So let's go ahead and just get on into it. So Mandy, the defense barrister, basically said, look, there's two main things that you need to be looking at with this whole situation, okay? So the first is there a reasonable possibility, is there a chance that the death cap mushrooms were accidentally added to the beef Wellington? Okay, is this in the realm of possibilities? Secondly, is there a reasonable possibility that the defendant, and I will quote, did not intend to kill or cause serious injury to her guest? And then he followed that up with, if either of these are a reasonable possibility, the jury must find Patterson not guilty. That's the law. So very similar to stuff that we hear, here in the States as well and whatnot. This reasonable doubt, reasonable possibilities. Could this have happened? Now, Mandy would then try to tear apart the prosecution's case and basically say, you know what? They came at this, they were picking and choosing. They were, we want to talk about this, but we don't want to talk about that. And essentially made their argument on the parts that fit their argument, right? But I mean, that's kind of just how that goes anyways. Now, they would mention there's also some inconvenient little truths that the prosecution is skipping over. And one of those examples would be that people have imperfect and honestly mistaken memories. And he'll go on to say that in this type of, logic and whatnot, some details get emphasized, others get minimized. This is just part of being human. Now, he would also ask the jury to go back, recall a time where they themselves might have told a story to a group of people, and then it was like recounted differently later. Now, the context that he was kind of like selling this whole thing to them was about the testimony of Kylie Ashton. If you remember, that was a nurse who said that Erin mentioned the kids had eaten the beef Wellington when she first showed up at the hospital. Now, Mandy would refer to this as the imperfect evidence because he's like, look, and I got a quote, this is not supported by other medical witnesses, and it was inconceivable that doctors knew about the children at the initial presentation as they would have taken urgent action, end quote. Now, also he would tell the jurors, I'm going to quote him again, quote, a fundamental part of the case is the issue of whether it is possible for people to share the same meal containing death cap mushrooms and have very different health outcomes. End quote. Now, I want to sofa sidebar here for a second on that because I'll forget, honestly. This is the part about this, my personal opinion on this. Okay, if she had made one beef Wellington and that happened, 100% got it. But because she made them individually, it's like, this is no. If it had been one, we would probably not even be here, right? This could have very well been passed off as, oh my gosh. Anyways, let's get enough of my opinion. Let's keep going. Now, Mandy would go on to say about that, and he would make these claims like, hey, the prosecution doesn't even believe that that's possible. And then he would say, and I'll quote, begin quote, they should have called evidence if there was a medical reason that Patterson did not become as unwell as her lunch guest, end quote. Now, Mandy would also say and ask the jury to, quote, quote, put natural human emotions aside and judge the case on facts alone. And then he would draw their attention back to something that Ian Wilkinson said. Remember, the lone survivor. And I'm going to quote again, begin quote. It was to everyone in the courtroom that he is a kind and good person. And the same applies to the 3 lunch guests who died. Human beings naturally feel deep empathy when confronted with events of loss. And humans often have an instinctive reaction to seek retribution for someone whose actions have caused the death of others. And ultimately, we know the actions of Erin Patterson caused the deaths of these 3 people and the serious illness of another. As jurors and judges, you have to put your natural human emotions to one side. End quote. Now, Mandy would also talk about the whole motive thing, right? And he'd remind them, hey, look, the prosecution did not have to prove motive. However, begin quote, one element of the offense of murder is the intention to kill or cause serious injury. They have to prove that's what Erin Patterson meant to do. Proof of a motive or the fact of a motive can be very important to intention, end quote. Now, the defense would also say that the prosecution was basically just scrounging up, looking for any kind of evidence about animosity, this type of stuff in the family dynamics. And they would bring up the whole child support, the financial concerns, all that type of stuff, right? And he would say that they also are trying to show these relationship difficulties could be a reason to try and murder, all these relatives a few months later, right? Now, Mandy also tries to kind of do what I consider almost like the reverse psychology or whatever. And he says, quote, if Patterson was a murderer, she would have known the spotlight would be on her when her guests were hospitalized. It was inevitable the focus would be on the cook. And if she was planning to murder her guest, she would not have bought a dehydrator from a local store under her own name, take photos of the dehydrator and mushrooms in the appliance, and post these images in a Facebook group chat. Erin Patterson did the opposite of all those things because she didn't have a plan. End quote. Now, let's stop there for 1 second and talk about that, because this is one of the dynamics about this case that makes it very confusing and like what was going on. Because while I agree with what he's saying, I'm like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Again, look at Alex Cox, right? If you followed me with the Lori Daybell trial, he's getting a burner phone, checking his Gmail, looking up escape routes from the scene of the crime, okay? Come on. People have done worse for less. However, I think Erin's case in this situation is so much more complicated because I think that there's a lot of extreme emotional reaction that she's doing. So I think she could have a plan. She's going this way. There's almost like a volatile emotional reaction, and we go, and we come back down here and we have to recalibrate. It's like, oh my God, we did this way up here. We weren't planning on that, but I reacted. And now these are this is how this has steered the ship. So now we're going this way. We have to act accordingly. Basically, if whatever plan she might have had got quickly derailed, and I think she just wasn't, even though she did her research on stuff, she just didn't scratch that deep beneath the surface. I think that the intentionality of this, whatever it might be, whether it was to kill people or to have them sick or whatever that was, it was almost the classic case of they thought they were going to get away with it in the way that they did it. And clearly it didn't work out. Now back to the old pesky motive. He had this to say, I'm going to quote him, it's kind of a long one. There are very good reasons not to harm these people and to embark on this plan. She would lose the only people in the world who were any support to her and her children. Not only that, she would lose the children and everything that was important to her. It's very unlikely that anyone in those circumstances would make that choice. Now, remember how I talked about the beef Wellingtons and the fact that there was 6 different ones and all this type of stuff? Well, he brings that up, okay? And he'll tell the court, he'll tell the jury about the prosecution's theory that, quote, it fails if they can't provide a non-poison pasty exist. And to continue down the prosecution's path, Patterson would have had to have eaten all of her beef Wellington. Otherwise, there would have been non-poison beef Wellingtons in her bin. He also drew the jury's attention to her testimony that she did not eat all her beef Wellington and the remnants were in the bin outside of her house. So if her portions were in the bin, then her portions were poisoned, end quote. I don't know what to think about that. That little claim, that little statement. To me, there's so many variables that it could have taken place. Number one, it's relying upon her telling the truth. Right? There's just all there is to say about it, okay? It's relying upon that. So she could have disposed of her somewhere else. She could have done, there's no telling, right? We've seen at minimum that Erin has a little bit of an issue with lying. So that's where I'm like, anything that hinges on that, and I get it's like, well, there should be a non-poisoned one. Think about food that gets thrown in the garbage bag. You know what I mean? I'm just like, this is very flimsy testimony in my opinion, but I digress. Let's keep going. Now, he would also talk about Erin making the decision to get on the stand, be under scrutiny, do the several days of cross-examination and examining all that she did, right? And opening herself up to the scrutiny of the whole world. Now, before he wraps up this first day of closings, he would also tell the court, and quote, Erin spoke to many people after the lunch. At one point, she had conversations with more than 21 people in 24 hours. So it was difficult to remember what she told each person, end quote. Now, on that note, and I go back to this tried and true thing here, if you're telling the truth, you don't have to remember what to say, or like however that saying goes. And I think that this plays true here. Yes, there is a level of pretend that like you're telling the truth, but you still talk to 21 people. Sure, you're gonna get like, oh God, did I tell him this time, whatever. But we're talking about major inconsistent stories here, right? Now, Mandy would also refer to the prosecution's case as one on hindsight reasoning. And then he would deliver this last little thing to the jury here. I'm gonna put it on the screen and read through it. You can read through it with me or just listen to me. The prosecution has invited you to think about what you would do in the situation if this was really a horrible accident. They were asking you to engage in an activity that could be seductive, but is flawed because it is based on hindsight reasoning, which in a way shifts the burden of proof onto the defense. It's the prosecution's job to provide what the accused actually did and not to engage in a hypothetical comparison of what you or someone else might do in the same situation. They should be relying on the evidence, because when you know the outcome of a situation and reflect on it, things might become clear as things seem obvious in retrospect, but that's not the right way of approaching it. Now, Mandy would also talk about the whole foraging thing and Erin's curiosity with it and the whole 9 yards, right? And he would remind the jury, he was like, look, her interest with the whole foraging thing and mushrooms, all that, this started during the COVID lockdowns. And he's like, and this was documented on an SD card that was seized. Now, he was like, look, this is proof that, and I'm gonna quote, it's not made up, it's not fabricated. These photos are evidence and confirmation that Erin Patterson had an interest in mushrooms at exactly the same time that the mycologist Thomas May said public interest in mushrooms was becoming more popular, end quote. Now, on that note, he was like, okay, those whole little pesky online searches about the deadly mushrooms, those were just idle curiosity. Then in regards to like the time spent that she was looking at this stuff and whatnot, he said this was just a passing attention rather than an abiding interest. Now, remember, her search history shows that, you know, okay, these death cap mushroom pages and whatnot, they were only visited for like a few seconds. And then Mandy would state there's not one scrap of evidence that Erin Patterson saw the iNaturalist death cap post, and no evidence that Patterson returned to the iNaturalist website after May 2022, end quote. Now, let's go through some just like quick bullet point type stuff here, right? So the defense would say that Erin Patterson made the first move to apologize after an argument over getting a late invitation to Gail's 70th birthday party. Remember that whole thing that went down, and she's like, they didn't invite me, why'd you do this, whatever. So the defense was like, well, this proves, you know, at least according to Mandy, that there's no way she killed 3 people, because this is not how a cold-blooded person would behave, right? You know, there's a lot of nuances that go on with Erin that, and clearly I get it, the defense is doing their job, but that are being skipped over. Now, he also called the disagreement over, remember the whole child support disagreement money thing or whatever with Simon? He said that was a minor thing. He also reminded the jury that this was the evidence the prosecution showed that reflected tension. Now, he would also say that these people are eternally polite to each other. The Pattersons are always polite in their exchanges, so when Erin is being honest about how she is feeling, that might have been a little bit confronting for them. It wasn't rude, it wasn't aggressive. She was standing up for herself and being direct. Now, he would also say that Erin was not living a deceptive life, acting one way to Simon and his family and another to like her online friends. He was like, Erin's very straightforward, right? And then he would also say to the jury, quote, it should be obvious to you that when she's upset about something, she raises it with the people she's upset with. She's not hiding it. She's not pretending that everything is okay. She's expressing it, end quote. I mean, on that, I'll say this real quickly. I mean, on some level, yes, he's right. She does do that. But from what I have seen so far, and again, was I there? No. Was I in the courtroom? No. Do I know these people? No. So it's just from the comfort of the sofa with the weird pillow. But to me, what I view is I'm like, there's a lot of weird emotional manipulation on her part that goes on before she's backed into a corner of some sort or cools down. And here's one thing too that I'll say, because I mean, I can be, and you're gonna be like, oh really, Paul? We never would have guessed that, right? I can be emotional. I can be dramatic. So a part of me recognizes, and I'm not trying to sit here and say that I would be like, well, let's just kill everybody with mushrooms. I mean, we're not talking on that level, right? But like just in general, where it's like, I'll have an emotional reaction and then, okay, here we are. But like, I'm not thinking clearly because I'm thinking with my emotions, if that makes sense. And so there's a part of me that can I feel like I recognize this pattern. And that's why I say things like, I feel like if she did have a plan, it might have started off at train station A, but when we were going, we hit a hiccup and it was like, boom, and that was an emotional reaction, an outburst of sorts on her part. And then when she came back down here, she very well might have apologized and been like, you know what, everybody, I want to apologize to y'all with my fake pillow microphone. I'm really sorry about doing those things and won't do them again. And she probably very well meant it, right? But I feel like I just see that. Okay, now obviously this is extreme. So for the defense to sit here, and again, they're just doing their job. Anybody would want a defense attorney to get them out of trouble, right? So I get that, okay? However, it's almost like the defense is doing what they're saying the prosecution's doing. Each side does this in anything, right? Where the defense is being like, no, she technically apologized, so she's an even keel person. And it's like, blah, 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 blah. To get to the apology, we went through a whole bunch of stuff. That whole invitation over the birthday party thing, that was insanity. That was a glimpse into something. So if you take that little instance of rejection to, oh, we're actually, this might be truly ending and I'm losing all these people and all these people are losing me, that's some powerful stuff right there for somebody that has that level of a fear of rejection. And it could be just powerful enough to want to do something like make everybody sick and nurse them back to health. Or if I can't have you, nobody can. I'll reject y'all before you can me, and I'll do it with the ultimate way, right? Now, about the Facebook group chats and all that stuff, right? And the defense would say a distraction from the real evidence and completely lack nuance. So the defense is like, they're asking you, the prosecution, whatever, to rely on 3 days of upset by Erin and ignore the years-long relationship with Simon, his parents, all this. Now, the defense would also say that the private conversation where Erin referred to Simon's parents as a lost cause was like nothing more than an emotional release. Now, Mandy would also then say to the jurors, most of you will understand someone being polite to their grandmother and swearing like a trooper with your mates, or maybe the other way around if you've got a cool grandmother and really nerdy mates. Now, then Mandy would kind of turn his arguments around to almost like portraying Erin as a little bit of a victim, maybe. And he would tell the court, the jurors, whatever, the prosecution dedicated a lot of time to the messages during this trial, and the whole world is now scrutinizing them. You know, I mean, it is what it is, right? Now, he would basically just be like, you know what, there's no bad blood, there's no venom, there's no nothing in Erin and Simon's relationship. Then he would also circle back to Dawn and Gail's good relationship with Erin. And he would say about that, quote, Simon's parents were happy to go to Erin's house in June and in July for the fateful meal. The fact is, there's just simply no evidence that contradicts the position we're putting to you. Now, here's my thing on that. I legit feel like this is probably how it went down amongst the guests or whatever, like to themselves, especially if they talk beforehand. It was probably like this, like pretend like the victims are all talking beforehand or whatever, you know, especially the wives. And they're like, ugh, did you get the invite? Yeah. Oh, bless her heart. I guess, what is it going to be this time? Well, she said there was some kind of thing she wants to talk about. Okay, well, y'all are going to go? Yeah, we'll go. Almost like they felt sorry for her, but not in the way that it's like someone that you truly, I'm not saying they didn't care about her, but I think they were probably privy to the type manipulation that she's kind of seemingly known for. And so it was probably like, yeah, this is just another Tuesday here, right? But okay, we'll come over for dinner or whatever. Especially since they had never really been there. Like, this was very odd, the whole thing altogether, right? So that part, I just feel like it was more like a, oh man, you're ready to go home the second you get there type vibe. Anyways, let's keep going. Now, Erin's tragic case of elbow cancer will make its way back into the closing arguments. The defense would say just because Erin lied about the lump on her elbow does not mean that she is guilty of triple murder. She often thought there was something wrong with her, and often this worry was without substance. He also told the jurors to keep in mind that she's not on trial for lying. This is not a court of, as I said to you, moral judgment. You should not leap from the lie about the lump of her elbow to finding her guilty for 3 murders, end quote. Now, again, if there wasn't all this other evidence of the mushrooms and the pictures and all this kind of stuff, maybe so, right? Because he is right. You could be a pathological liar, but that doesn't make you a murderer. You could be a murderer and the most honest, God-fearing, human being, never told a lie in your life, but you've got 10 bodies underneath your porch, right? I mean, that's the thing about life. It's very complicated. It's very nuanced. And I feel like the internet in general has kind of like conditioned us to not get those nuances that we get in life, right? So it's just like this whole narrative of like, look, you know, she didn't do this, so there you go. And it's like, no, people in life is way more complex than these narratives that are being spun. It is what it is, but it's just frustrating. So I'm like, yeah, we get that, right? It's just because she's a liar, but that doesn't change anything. He would also say that if Erin was like truly trying to mislead the whole situation, that she would have told them about the medical issue before the lunch. My take on that is I'm like, no, because then they could have like come to a thing of being like, you've got what? You got lump what? It's giving this, if you follow me, you know, I say this all the time. What kind of business you girls in? I can't believe we forgot to make up what kind of business we're in. Like so much of this trial is giving that. Drop in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. But so this right here, I'm just like, no, if I was Erin, I wouldn't have told them what it was either. I would have been elusive to trigger the whole thing of like, hey, I don't know why I'm talking to you on a pretend pillow microphone for the phone, but are y'all going to Erin's house this weekend? Yeah, I guess we have to. Yeah, did she tell you what was up? I don't know, some kind of medical thing. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll go. I'm kind of dying to know now, right? Like, yeah, if it was something else, they could have maybe just gotten around it, right? But you know, that struck curiosity. They were like, okay, let's go. And probably they were also carrying people. I mean, when they're sitting there dying in the hospital, they're concerned about how Erin is, right? So I'm not trying to negate it down to, or, you know, dwindle it down to like, oh, they just get, no. But I think Erin knew how to manipulate the situation to get authentically caring people into her lair. Now, Mandy would go on and on and on about whether Erin told the guests she had a cancer diagnosis or suspected cancer. And this went back and forth and back and forth. It was very much who's on first, who's on second, that whole vibe, right? Now, let's go back to the whole Asian grocer thing. Mandy would state, quote, "It is very probable that Patterson bought dried mushrooms from the Asian grocer because her account of the packaging was consistent with those sold in those stores." Again, my thing is two things can be true at one time. Just because it's specific to that doesn't mean that happened. She probably already knew that or could have stopped at one somewhere else to see what they're like. Moving on. Now, the dehydrator, okay? Like the dehydrator and obviously death cap mushrooms. These are two things that have been so prevalent in beef Wellington. In this case, like you learn something from true crime by following it. This is one of them, right? So he said, quote, "It's unlikely Patterson would buy a dehydrator if she only required it for the beef Wellington lunch. You can dehydrate things in the oven. This purchase would make much more likely to be a long-term project or hobby." Now, also, this is like another thing too. If you want to sit here and talk about like pre-planning and all that type of stuff, I have no doubt that she maybe was interested in the dehydrator and this could be something that she got and like, oh, cool. But also, if you think about it, she took the time to make non-poison ones. If you were going to try and take out a bunch of people or make them sick and cook individual beef Wellingtons or something and leave some not like that, would you want to cook it in your oven? If you knew that there was an extreme toxin and poison, would you want to cook it in your oven or cook it in something or do something to it that you could dispose of and be done with it after it was finished, and then preferably clean up all the evidence? Right? Do the math on that one. Let's keep going. Now, as far as the telecommunications expert, he said that he was seriously misstating the evidence and that he didn't say that. What he said was it was possible that her phone could be in the area. So yeah, and again, with phone pings and stuff like that, unless it's Alex Cox's phone, okay, I don't know what kind of phone he has, but it's like directly linked to the FBI, okay? You could tell what blade of grass Alex Cox was standing next to, but in general, these phones, yeah, the pings can all be a little bit different, but I mean, come on, when you start adding up all the things, this is what I'm talking about with the nuances and whatnot. Now, Mandy would then also accuse the prosecution of being selective with the data it provided to the Sorrel, and then he would use this following example, and he would say, quote, "During trial, the court heard that event-based monitoring data from mobile phone networks showed Ms. Patterson's phone connected to towers near where the death cap mushrooms grew. However, the limitation of his analysis was the fact that he only had EBM data for a handful of days. It's 23 days out of 500. Now, as all this is like finishing up, doing its thing, day two, whatever, he would reiterate a few key points to all the jurors. He said, "Dr. Thomas May said said it was often difficult to identify death cap mushrooms, and he stated it's quite possible, obviously, that a person might pick death cap mushrooms instead of the other mushrooms they're accustomed to. Now, also, Mandy would restate that the prosecution was alleging that Ms. Patterson also intended to kill her husband, and that it's absurd as the consequences of such an act would be far too severe for herself and for her children. There's no possible prospect that Erin wanted to destroy her whole world, her whole life. Now, about the plates, the different plates and all that type of stuff, he said that Erin was basically honestly mistaken over those plates. He said on this, like, if Erin was making an unpoisoned beef Wellington, right, doing all this, whatever, that she would have to mark it in a way to differentiate it from the poisoned ones, obviously, end quote, in which case she would not need different colored plates. And I'm like, that's exactly why she has to go to the different plates. Okay, because here's the other thing too. We don't know what she did behind the scenes. You know she had those things separate, right? So like, and again, like if it's the gray and orange, whatever, I forget off the top of my head, you know somewhere in the kitchen zone, so all they see is the plates, plate up, whatever, and however she did it, to be like, bam, here's this. You know, like through body positioning, you know how things go. It's amazing what you can do with just a little shift of your body to something or a hand gesture towards something to get the guess. She corralled people is what I'm trying to say. So I'm just like, well, yeah, you would want to make double sure, but I think she made double sure behind the scenes. And the presentation to people was like, that was the last ditch. I know this is the good one. This is the clean one. I'm okay with this one type thing, right? But again, he's having to do whatever he can do and whatever he can throw against the wall to see what sticks. Now, he also went back to the whole thing about how much of the lunch that Erin ate. And he said that Ms. Patterson previously told the court she only ate around half of the portion. Now, this is contrary to what the prosecution wants to believe, he said. Her estimate was not contradicted by other witnesses. It was an exact estimate and would be difficult to measure. After all, how would you know if you ate exactly half or not? My client was never asked how much of the meal she ate at the hospital and says if she had, the prosecution would have used it as an example of incriminating conduct. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now, he also would go on to say that Erin did get sick later that day. Obviously, her symptoms were milder than others and started earlier, and there is an explanation for this. Patterson was tasting the mushroom paste for the beef Wellington while she was cooking the meal, at least a few hours before her guest ate it. He asked they not discount her age and weight as possible factors in her not getting as sick as her guest. Then he would go all out and put out to the jury, like, this is how much she weighs at the time of the lunch or whatever, and was significantly younger than her guest. So he's basically like, look, she's overweight, this is how much she weighs, she was younger, you know, she was just over there, him putting her weight out there like that, place. She, you know, she was just absolutely under that table. I can see the narrative where he's going with that, to be like, look, you know, she's heavier, she's younger, so she's, you know, she's gonna react to things differently. It's a good argument, but you know, Erin was like, oh my God. Now then, about that whole pesky discharging herself thing, he talks about that as well. And he says that when she arrived, she was thinking like, oh, I'm gonna be getting these fluids for this gastric, this stomach thing, whatever, and that she wasn't prepared to be admitted and transferred and all that, right? Now, at this point in time, again, I'm just like, that doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. You shouldn't even care about that. If you're showing up thinking, oh, I'm just gonna do this or that, and people are dying, and you're gonna go run errands, you find somebody to go do that for you. Now, he also said she's not refusing treatment. She was saying that there were things she needed to do before she was admitted and transferred, and that she was struggling to process what she, you know, had been told, right? And he continues by saying, if you're pretending to be sick, you're going to be saying up to the medical staff, hook me up, pump me full of drugs. Now, again, I get his argument here. It's a good argument. In some cases, it would make sense. But this is where I think that what Erin does is she does something and then it went off script. Whatever the plan was, it went off script numerous times and then would be rewritten, and then the new script would go off script. And so I think this part right here, she panicked, she freaked. She was like, I don't want to get this stuff done. It's what, I don't know. She probably also wanted to go see what they're going to do, what kind of treatments it was, to make sure she could handle whatever it was, right? But I mean, again, I don't know, I wasn't there. Then the whole coffee thing, okay? So this is about the son saying like she was drinking coffee, it was wasn't tea, that whole situation, right? And he would bring the son's testimony into question. He would ask the jurors, like in a rhetorical kind of way, was he watching his mother like a hawk all morning? I submit Patterson's son was not focused on his mother, end quote. Now, he would also say that the prosecution was, again, like nitpicking at evidence, ignoring other evidence, all that. And he said, again, quote, she didn't sound like her happy self that Sunday morning, end quote. Now, here's the whole thing with that. Like, if that's the testimony, I'm like, well, yeah, she knew what she just did. She's probably panicking. She's probably literally like that alone would make me completely sick, right? Now, then Mandy would ask the jurors, like, use your common sense, okay? We need to look at yesterday's testimony. And he would acknowledge to the jury that there may be no evidence to show that Erin tasted the dish after adding the dried mushroom, okay? And he's like, but use your common sense. That's usually what happens when you make a thing, like you're tasting it, you're going along with it. I'm like, yeah, but not if it's poisoned. Again, I don't even think she was sick. I think she literally could have just been panicked. Okay, like literally just panicked. Like, I mean, I would have been throwing up and barfing everywhere over that, okay? Now, speaking of the children, let's see what Mandy had to say about not getting the kids tested, right? He would claim that, quote, Miss Patterson arranged for her children to be tested when the issue was first raised with Dr. Foote. Once she understood the concerns, she made those arrangements, end quote. I mean, I literally can't roll my eyes hard enough moment, right? Now, Mandy would conclude this part of the argument. I'm going to put this screenshot up on the screen and read through it. You can read through it with me or listen along. So you see on the screen here, it says Patterson's children's consumption of leftover meat. Mandy says the jury have not heard any expert evidence about whether Patterson's children would become ill from eating the leftover beef Wellington meat with the mushroom scraped off. He says the jury cannot rule out other possibilities, such as the death cap mushroom toxins not being absorbed into the meat. Mandy points to evidence about some samples of the leftovers being negative for these toxins, while others were positive. Does this not show that the distribution of amatoxins is very inconsistent with those samples? Now, he would also revisit the whole, my client was sick type thing or whatever about the witness. Remember, she was talking about the dehydration and the diarrhea and all that kind of stuff or whatever, right? A mild, very little, this and that and diarrhea. Who knows what she took or whatever to make this look that way. Now, I'm going to put another screenshot up here. This is about the store-bought mushrooms. You can listen or read through with me. The store-bought dried mushrooms. Mandy turns to the evidence about Patterson saying she bought dried mushrooms from an Asian grocer in the months before the beef Wellington lunch. He says she was never saying to anyone she was certain which suburb the shop was in. Mandy says the prosecution argued Patterson did not tell health officials what the dried mushroom packaging looked like until later on. But he says the 4 medical witnesses who first spoke to her about the Asian grocer did not ask her this. He says they asked if she still had the packaging. It's an example of answering the question you're being asked, he says. You need to think about the question Patterson was being asked to assess the answer in light of it. Mandy says Department of Health official Sally Ann Atkinson was the first person who asked Patterson that the packing looked like, and Erin answered it. Mandy says one of the small number of Asian grocers visited by Troy, a Monash City Council worker, matched the packaging that Patterson described. A very specific memory, one you could readily accept as true, he says. Now, he would then also bring up that dehydrator and how it was like a total panic moment for Erin. I'm going to put another screenshot up and read through it for you. Patterson testified that Simon asked her if she had used a dehydrator to poison his parents. Simon denied asking this. Mandy says that's when the wheels started turning. The possibilities that foraged mushrooms went into the meal. Mandy says the meal was clearly a suspect, and child protection was involved. He says the jurors know that his client's life revolves around her children. She starts panicking and she starts lying at this point. Mandy says if his client had come forward with her realization at this point, it would make no difference at all. Mandy says from this moment, Patterson began to conceal that foraged mushrooms went into the meal. She feared if that was found out, she would be held responsible, he says. None of what she did after the lunch could change what her intention was at the time of the lunch, Mandy says. Now, Mandy would then go back over like all of his rationalizations about the multiple phones, the iNaturalist post, the trips log, Altram, all that, right? And then he would tell the jurors the defense has debunked the prosecution's top 4 propositions, which he refers to as convoluted, absurd, all sorts of, little 10-cent words, right? Now, then after that, he would conclude with the following. I'll put it up on the screen and I'll read through it. This case is like a jigsaw puzzle, and you cannot force pieces together. The prosecution has tried to force evidence to fit their case. The jurors cannot fill in the gaps in the puzzle with speculation, guesswork, and theories. You only act on the evidence because you're the judges. You must consider whether the prosecution has proved the case beyond a reasonable doubt, as the evidence exists and not how they wished it. Their case is flawed due to relying on misleading impressions of evidence, using hindsight to reconstruct evidence, and working backwards without expert evidence to manufacture a picture. That's what happened here. They started at the end and worked backwards. Consider what is more likely, that Patterson wanted to reconnect with her in-laws, or she wanted to kill everyone. He says you can't conclude she's probably guilty. If you think that there is reasonable possibility that this is an accident, you must acquit. If you think it's likely that she deliberately poisoned the meal, you must find her not guilty. This totally feels like almost like if the meal ain't lit, you gotta acquit. Oh man, if you know what I'm saying. If the meal won't lit, you gotta quit, okay? I mean, here's the thing, so again, depending on when you're seeing this, I'm gonna go over like the judges, and jury instructions, and obviously whenever we get a verdict or whatever. I go both ways in this. I personally think she intentionally did this. I do not know what her intention was. I still can't answer that at this point. I'm baffled by it, but I think it's because, again, there was an intention that started off here that was nefarious on some level, and it could have been as benign as I'm gonna make everybody sick and I'm gonna take care of them and bring them back in my life, and it could have been as drastic as they're gonna leave me, so I'm taking them all out and I'll get away with it. It doesn't make sense, and I just think along the way she had emotional reactions and had to rewrite the script over and over and over and over and over, and because she did that, she was leaving out huge chunks of parts that she didn't. And another thing I think is it's very likely, even though it's very hard for me to accept, that maybe in the very beginning of this, she did not think that she was going to get caught with the mushrooms. Almost like they weren't going to be able to figure that out, right? So it was going to be maybe like a Tylenol murder situation, something, okay? So I don't know. I am dying to know. So this is it. Evidence done. Do you think guilty or not guilty? Do you think intentional, not intentional? Do you think she wanted them sick or dead? Okay. So drop it like it is hot in the comment section. Drop it like it is a poison death cap mushroom and you just accidentally picked it up. Okay. I'm dying to know. So this is a bit of a long one. So if you're still watching, I greatly appreciate it. While you're down there in the comment section dropping off the little death cap mushrooms, drop off some more pillows, or not pillows, sofas with some weird pillows. For myself, Roscoe and Spirit, Bo and Luke, and the Sofa Squad. So I'll have a place to sit and talk about this case, all the other cases we talk about here at the Sofa Squad. And until we do all that down there, I'll see y'all soon.
I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. And then like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Roscoe on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.
Hey, welcome to the Sofa Squad. Sipping from the cup that hey, come laugh with the Sofa Squad. Can't roll my damn eyes hard enough.